All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. My name is Girstin Bergquist, and I am moderating today's panel for the TUF Woman table. I am pleased to announce my special guests, Taffy and Zaida. They are both advocates, and Zaida is a special guest, and I'd like you to introduce yourself first, if you can, please.
Hi, yes. My name is Zaida Pacheco. I'm the Director of Client Services at Domestic Violence Solutions in Santa Barbara, California.
Thank you. And okay, you, Taffy, now, please.
My name is Taffy Hunter. I live here in Spokane, Washington, and I am a victim advocate for a local organization called Relationship Advantage, and working on opening my own nonprofit as well.
All right, and that's pretty much what I am doing as well. My name is Girstin Bergquist. I'm an advocate and an activist for a lot of legislation policy change here, starting from California and hopefully going up to Congress. I'm a big advocate for coercive control being addressed properly. I just like to mention that real fast. We're going to be discussing the warning signs that lead to violence escalating to physical. And then we'll be going over what a safety plan entails and how that could help you or a loved one or somebody you know who might be suffering from violence that may be hidden, or even there's a lot of feedback here that we're going to be giving you. So anybody that you think could benefit from this, I'd really appreciate you getting this forward, because right now we are going through such a tough time out there with the pandemic and all other sorts of chaos right now, where a lot of victims and survivors are kind of left to fend for themselves. So let me introduce the show real fast. Welcome to the TUF Woman Roundtable. It is a space for all people to pull up their seat, connect, and create. And we'll talk about some epic conversations. At TUF Woman Table, we believe that all people have the power within themselves to live life authentically, free from fear, confident in who they are, and empowered to live a life that sets their soul on fire. I also believe that by one person showing up in their authentic truth, we give other people permission to step into their own truth, thus giving us the opportunity to rise up together. It is through this joined rising that we moved ourselves and humanity forward to a more beautiful way of living and being. So pull up a seat, tune in, and join us as we create epic conversation that moves and reminds everyone of how truly powerful we are all within. So here we go. I would like to first kind of get to talking about what it is that advocates actually do for survivors and victims. Would you mind starting, Taffy, please?
Sure. My day is spent talking. I talk a lot. So my current job, I work at making a phone call to an identified victim, especially now during COVID. A lot of my stuff is just done over the phone instead of face-to-face. And initiating a discussion. How are they feeling? Are they feeling safe? Doing a safety plan with them, that sort of thing. The organization I work with is also a perpetrator treatment program. And so as part of that, we're required to make contact with the victim. And that's where a lot of my advocacy lays right now. Yeah, so just having those conversations, answering questions, giving referrals and resources, a listening ear. A lot of times, just the listening ear, understanding. And probably the most important thing that I do on a daily basis is say, I believe you.
That's very powerful. That's very true. Thank you so much. And then Zaida, can I have you also mention what it is you do and how your organization helps?
Yeah, so our advocates wear many hats in our organization. So we do anything from answering and manning our 24-hour crisis line. So there we have victims, survivors, we have, family members, friends, concerned family members and friends, law enforcement, medical personnel calling us to respond to any calls that they've gotten that have to do with domestic violence. So really our day-to-day is different every single day. We can have a day where, we're mainly just following up, checking in. And then there will be days where we're filled with crisis calls and people wanting to come into our shelters. So it really varies. But yeah, I think the main thing is just being someone who believes, a friendly person on the other side of the phone who can say, I hear you. I understand what you're going through. What is it that I can do to make sure that we get you into a safe environment? So that's a little bit of what we do.
Okay, wonderful. Yes. So I kind of, I do pretty much kind of the same thing. I work with a lot of people that are from across the country. So East Coast or from the South or Midwest. Because I basically just bring forth the resources that I can identify that would help victims at a good point in time, especially when they need to leave on an emergency basis. I wanted to also just talk about the importance of having an advocate, especially if you are dealing with even an emotionally toxic relationship that is abusive in that nature. It's always a good thing to have somebody that you can rely and vent on, and also create a paper trail just in case you ever get into a situation where you need to file a restraining order, for instance. This is something that I would like to talk about and discuss a little bit later on in the show. As well. But first, I would like to talk about the warning signs of behavior that we see in a lot of perpetrators that kind of indicate that physical violence is coming. So we can go around to Taffy first, please.
I think the most important thing that I talk to people about, and I write as well about on my blog, is that a relationship doesn't start out with a punch in the face or, a slap. Doesn't start out that way. It's a slow boil. And so it's really, it can be really tricky to see what is moving toward physical violence and when it's not moving toward physical violence. Of course, we've all heard the stories of, he never hit me and suddenly she has been murdered. And that's devastating. So I think that for me, a victim knows her relationship the best, and she knows her significant other better than anybody else. She knows the signs, she knows the signals. At the same time, she's also really good at denying them in some cases, or overlooking them for her own safety. And so helping a victim understand that it's okay to follow your gut. It's okay when your stomach tells you or your head tells you this is getting worse, this is escalating. Talking through that escalation with the victim, so maybe he was name calling previously, and now he's put in curse words with name calling. That's an escalation that maybe the general public would be like, so he told you to F off. What's new about that? Well, he never has before. And, that's something that we really need to pay attention to, even though it seems not very important, maybe. Same with, I hate terming it as minor incidences of physical violence, but victims seem to understand that terminology. So, he threw something at her, he didn't punch me, but he did throw a ball at me really hard and it left a bruise on my back. That's physical violence, right? He trips her or pushes her is another escalation. So any of those things, it's a change of behavior. It's an escalation of a power and control tactic. It's whatever he needs to use to keep her under his power and in control of the relationship so that she doesn't feel safe to be herself, to leave the relationship, to speak up. Any of those things are things that in an individual victim situation, it's really important that we talk about. I don't think that there are really specific maybe clues all the time, but that's why an advocate is so important, right? Because we can talk about that specific situation, that specific relationship, those specific escalations, because it's going to look different in every situation. But helping the victim understand we've been there, we've heard a million of these stories, and we can identify that escalation sometimes when the victim it's so foggy when you're a victim, and it's hard to think through that stuff. So yeah, that's what we look for.
There's a lot of confusion a lot of the time, and self-doubt a lot of the time as well. The way that many victims deal with the chaos is making excuses for the perpetrator, or rationalizing things, making it their fault as well. But Zaida, I'd love to hear from you. Let me unmute you, please. Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I feel like everything Taffy shared, I was like, yep, check. So I think the biggest thing that I would say would be these red flags to look out for sure. Isolation. I believe that is the number one thing that the perpetrators will have against these survivors, where if they are pushed away from family, if they've sort of shut those doors, they feel and they know that they have that control over this person, because this person is dependent on them on many levels. And so then the verbal becomes, or the verbal and the psychological starts to become physical. And as Taffy mentioned, it could start off with, it was just a shove, to this drastic, incident with weapons, involving weapons at that point. So I think one of the biggest red flags in my eyes is once the isolation starts to happen. And DV is all about control. So having control over another person. And I believe that it really varies on each relationship. It can, for some, it can slowly build. From others, for others, it could start, just as verbal, and then just completely shift overnight. So, I mean, it really is hard to state what specific behaviors are bigger red flags to identify, to state that, the physical will then start to occur. But I think for sure, in my eyes, I would say isolation is probably the scariest and biggest red flag in my eyes.
Correct. And I agree. I feel like isolation is one of the largest weapons that a perpetrator can use against you. And to address this real fast, a perfect example of this would be perhaps the abuser trash talking your family, trash talking your friends, trying to get your friends or family to side with them, exposing embarrassing things about you in public, the threat of sex porn, revenge porn, that kind of tactic, maybe even taking, audio or video of you doing something, and then reminding you that they have it in order for you not to talk, because that is really what a perpetrator's largest strength of is really their ability to impose themselves on you and anything that they want from you, their opinions. So you'll see a lot of different personality types that are very good at gravitating towards these tactics. And I wanted to also talk about the breaking of the property. This is clear intimidation. Once people start doing that, it's usually a big sign that they're ready to break something more than just property. And you'll see it in perhaps maybe for instance, maybe a phone gets thrown during an argument. I've actually experienced this with many partners that maybe they never, finally touched me, but it was a strong enough indicator for me to understand if they can just fly off the handle in a second and break something that's upward of $1,000 without any kind of remorse, then that should be a clear indication. Also, animal abuse. When they start using your pets against you, or even threatening your pets in front of you, that's another level of intimidation. So we have some comments from our lovely Ashley. Ashley is our host, and she's supporting us. Hi, Ashley. Thank you for being here. She says, are there signs someone can acknowledge in the beginning to be preventative, or do you believe in being blinded by love? Is that something that either of you would like to address first?
I would be happy to address that one. I believe that we have to keep the onus where it belongs, and it belongs on the perpetrator. And Lundy Bancroft is an amazing author who talks about the inside workings of perpetrators. And one of the biggest things I learned from him is that perpetrators are the best actors on the planet. And they will love you, and they will be charming, and you will find nothing wrong. I mean, my first husband, we dated for 10 months, we're engaged for 6 months. And there were very few red flags. As I look back at that dating and engagement relationship, there were very few red flags. There were a couple, and I would have, done well to have recognized them, and I didn't. But the onus is on him. I did not marry the same person I fell in love with. And that's his fault. That's not my fault. And I find that with the majority of abusive relationships. So blinded by love, I don't think that's usually the case. I think it's blinded by a charlatan.
Yes, I like how you said that. Okay, Sandra, did you have something that you wanted to comment on?
I mean, just same with what Taffy had to say in regards to, I think that a lot of the times, the victims feel that, or the survivors feel that they've, sort of like, it almost goes back to that feeling of, why did I not, or how did I not, or for people to come out and say, how did you not see these flags, right? People know domestic violence. Mm-hmm. They know that, the verbal and the physical. And so a lot of the times it's that feeling of, how did I miss those, or how did they, right? How did they miss those very clear cut signs? But I agree. It's not, sometimes it's, I wouldn't say blinded by love, but I believe that people do sort of put up this persona. And what we see with a lot of the perpetrators is, the survivors that come into our shelter, that's not their first victim. That's not their first relationship that they've had that,
Oh. Uh-oh.
Am I cutting out?
Yeah, you cut out a little bit.
Okay.
We can go back to, it wasn't their first.
It wasn't, right. So it wasn't their first relationship that they've been in, where they've been a perpetrator. And so I think that a lot of the times the perpetrators know how, to smooth talk and what to say and when not to say certain things. So I don't think that it's necessarily a love is blind. Is the way that things and people present themselves at first can be very different than when, people really start to get comfortable and know what someone's weaknesses are, and then go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I wanted to kind of touch on grooming, what grooming means, and how the initial tactics of a lot of perpetrators come off as very smooth, charming, charismatic. They will vie for your attention, sometimes just completely try to seduce you in ways that, you've never been seduced, or you've never been swept off of your feet. I'd also like to kind of touch on what mirroring is, if that's something you guys can talk about, because a lot of times there are certain personality types that are very, very well versed in coming across in the way, like the positive pieces of you that they like, and almost as a way to project, right? So they'll see your beautiful aspects and they'll almost puppet them, if you know what I mean. Have you ever, do you have any comments about that, Taffy?
Yeah, it's a crazy phenomenon. They're like chameleons. Mm-hmm. That's the best way I can describe how perpetrators can come across. They're like chameleons. They attach themselves to every good thing in your life. They love your mom until you get married, or you move in together, or you've been together for a certain amount of time, right? They agree with your political stance. They they talk about the things that are passionate to you sometimes and reinforce those things. They're chameleons. That's part of their charm. That's part of what we're drawn to. You know, we're such a good match. We're soulmates. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. All right. And then Zaida, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, what Taffy said, where it's almost with the whole mirroring thing. And I think that's usually what from the start gets you to feel that this relationship is different, right? So they pick at those specific things, they attach to, you know, all the assets, all the you know, everything you have. That I always tell our clients, you know, they see all the good, you know, you're an amazing person, they see all the good, they mirror that. And so then you feel as if this relationship, like, where did this come, like, where did this person come from? Super different than what you've possibly dated in the past. And mind you, a lot of our survivors are also getting, you know, it's not their first time in an abusive relationship. And so it's almost that feeling of, after a really terrible relationship, here comes this person who sees all these things in you that you may not see because your self-esteem is super broken at that point. And so then it almost feels like this magical, different relationship. So that's always interesting to see.
Right. Yes. The contrast. Go ahead, Taffy.
Well, I just, you know, the whole idea, again, that perpetrators use with all of their tactics is power and control. Mm-hmm. And the way we give them that power control over time is they create this sense of love, this sense of safety, this sense of comfort in the relationship. And that's what mirroring does. It creates that sense of, I'm safe with this person. I'm comfortable with this person. And then you become vulnerable with that person. Mm-hmm. And then he can use all your vulnerabilities against you.
Right. That's right. There's also a lot of, I'd like to mention, if we're going around the power and control topic, the topics of minimizing, denying, blame shifting. These are all, again, tactics that if you believe you are being abused, you must really be in tune to what that could look like. So anytime, like a put down, you didn't cook this well enough. You didn't, you know, there could be little things that start out like that could escalate to a point of telling you that they don't want you to take a certain job, or forbidding you from speaking to a friend that they know might be able to be the light and shining armor for you, almost pull you out of a situation. So there are definitely circumstances like that to be aware of. And I have a comment from Ashley that I would like to read. She says, I've had that experience. He didn't hit me, but he screamed in my face and broke a chair on the wall next to my head. Yeah. This, I'm sorry. First of all, Ashley, I'm sorry. This is very frightening. Unfortunately, this is something, again, that's a precursor to an assault, basically, especially when again, stuff is being broken, stuff is being thrown around. I had a past ex that stormed out of a salsa class when we were taking salsa class at a college, and left to a different dance room until I joined him in there. And once I brought up some things that he didn't want to hear, he picked up a chair and had no problem smashing a whole mirror at a public place. And see, the thing is, there's little things that could signify, you know, like that could happen, but there's also times where people are going to have these intermittent explosive episodes, to where there could be no varying degrees or shades of gray between the black and white. So it all, again, really boils down to like your specific situation, the mentality of the person that you're with, but you ultimately do know your abuser, or you're right, the most better than anybody. The key here is really just the awareness and the education aspect. So we can start. Did you have anything else to add, Saida? No? Okay. And I wanted to see if we had any more. Are there signs? Someone, sorry, I already read that one. She says, I agree with Taffy. Definitely make sure we hold people accountable. Why is it so key to have a strong support system around you? So yes, I wanted to actually talk about what could your best friend or your sister or your mother, for instance, if you think that somebody is in an abusive relationship, the best thing that I would particularly like to say is that to provide that ear, provide that safe space, free of judgment. The last thing that somebody who's being victimized wants to hear is, why did you go back? Or why are you staying? That's not necessarily exactly what they need at the time. What would be more helpful, and I like to add alternatives as solutions, is providing that friend with a resource, just in case she has a tough time or a scare, or perhaps even coming up with a safe word. So I would like to move into the space now, talking about our escape plan, our way to leave. What should we do? The safety checklist. So let's have Zaida, please, if you could address this first, and then we'll come back to Taffy, and I'll add some stuff to it.
Yeah, safety planning. It's always the biggest thing. I always, one of the things that I tell our advocates all the time is, no matter what person is calling, whether it's a family friend, a concerned coworker, whomever it is, there always should be some sort of a safety plan. And safety plans are something that should be revisited on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times. Safety plans will look different for each individual. Safety plans can look different throughout the day, depending on whether children are involved and they're going to school. So really, that I always say safety, and it may be because there was a specific incident that happened with one of our clients. That, I mean, I have so many stories with safety planning, but there was this one time that looking back, I said, had things been a little different, and had this individual, had the support, because there was a lot of organizations that were involved at this point. We were sort of just the last ones to get the information, right? They've been, monitoring this family. The schools had been informed. There were social workers involved, and then, it's okay, let's refer them to domestic violence solutions. And at that point, we're bringing anyone and everyone that's wanting to come in, or that feels that that's their only way out at the moment. And so my thing is always never put our own feelings and or agenda on our survivors. Our survivors, their abuse past, right? So they know how this person may react, when it's safest to leave, how it's safest to leave. So I always say we're always just a listening ear to sort of guide them to think about certain things that they, at the time of crisis, may not be thinking of. But other than that, I always say it's their safety plan. We have to make sure that we're not putting our agenda on them, because sometimes when we think that it's safest for them to leave, it may not be the best time for them to leave. And I have seen things go down really, really south because a safety plan was not set, or someone else's agenda sort of altered the survivor's agenda, and it didn't end up well. So I think that as every time I do presentations in the community, that's the biggest thing that I say. If we all know someone that's whether they physically have come out and say or say, I'm a survivor of domestic violence, or this is going on in my home, or whatever it may be. We all, some way or another, are connected to someone who is currently going through domestic violence, is a survivor of domestic violence. So I always say, as a friend, as a person in the community, the thing that we can do is just gain as much knowledge that we can about what domestic violence, and really, really understand what domestic violence is and looks like and can look like, because it's not just physical and verbal. And so just to be able to identify those signs so that we can be extra supportive to that person, so that when this person comes, we don't take for granted these little messages that they may, or hints that they may be giving to us, so that when they are ready, or if they ever do feel comfortable coming to us to say, hey, this is happening, we have the resources to help them go through this process. And so then on the advocates end, it's more just being an active listener, not going in with any type of judgment, not going in with any kind of agenda, and really knowing that a safety plan can change and it could take months. I once had, I think it was a caller, and I think it took her about 3 months to come in. And at first I didn't know her name, but I recognized the caller because it was always the survivor and like 3 or 4 of her girlfriends. And so I sort of started to catch on that it was the same voices, same incidents. But at first there was no names that were given. It was more just, I was an active listener, sort of guiding them as to what can be done, or certain, pointing out certain things. And then it was like 3 months later that I finally got to meet this person, this individual in person, and was able to bring them into our shelter. So really, a lot of the times people think, okay, we're going to safety plan, and it's, next week we're still going to roll with that, and we're going to bring them in, or we're going to get them out of the situation they're in, and that's wrong. Safety plans should be constantly altered or changed or reviewed, and it's a process. Sometimes it's not going to happen overnight, and so I think those are the biggest things that I feel I always check myself or remind our advocates when safety planning.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I completely agree. And then, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that, Taffy?
I think that your question was a little bit two-parted, and I'll address the, how a friend or family member can help with that. I think the most important thing that a community member or a family member can do is be aware, and then believe the survivor, believe the victim when they're ready to disclose. And sometimes that might also mean that you approach them before they're ready to disclose, and you can say to them, I've noticed what's going on, and you don't have to discuss it right now with me, but I'm here for you when you're ready, and I get it. And whatever you need, that can be the first opening. Oftentimes I'll hear from survivors and victims who will say it was the doctor saying, I think something's going on in your life. When you're ready to talk about it, let me know, or a teacher or a friend who's just willing to open that conversation. I think that's how you'd be a really good ally. And then know the hotline number. You don't have to be the advocate for your friend or family member, but you can connect them to an advocate. You can connect them to a safety plan. You don't have to know how to safety plan yourself, right? So get that information, carry the hotline number in your wallet, or Google it real quick on your phone, local shelter, whatever the case may be. Just that one phone number can really help. They're there 24/7, and knowing that you're believed, knowing that there's resources, and knowing that other people are seeing what's going on in your life, that it's not this big secret, that other people are noticing, that makes a huge difference in somebody's ability to feel safe to come forward.
Right. And I would definitely recommend telling at least one person what's going on, no matter how difficult that may be. Sometimes, there's a multitude of reasons why people do not want to talk about abuse. I understand that. I've been there. But I think the healthiest thing that you could do to assure the safety, especially when you have children, is to confide in at least one person. They don't necessarily have to be an official, but maybe one person that you can at least vent to and be transparent with, because there might be a time when you're going to need that person to come to court, to do anything to help you out of the situation. I want to talk about now what it's like, because right now with the pandemic and everything, I think the safety planning has kind of shifted and could be even modified, because at first there were a lot of shelters, for instance, that were very much all at capacity, and we were at a shortage for having victims be put into a situation where they could be protected in a secure environment. So do either of you have anything you want to add to that?
So within our shelters, I mean, in our county, we never stopped. We didn't close our shelters. We didn't stop bringing in families or individuals that were in need of a confidential shelter. But what we did see around us a lot was that people were they weren't taking in new clients. At the start of COVID, no one knew what this was or what it was going to look like or play out to be. And then to this day, we still hear that individuals are, closing off their services to people only in their county, which is, very concerning, because here we have these survivors where we're saying domestic violence, especially when it includes stalking, it can be it can get really bad. And so a lot of the times what our safety planning may look like with someone is the only way you're really going to be able to be safe with your children is to move counties, to get as far away as you can from this individual. And so now we're limiting them to, their confined county or whatever it may be, because maybe outside counties aren't bringing in anyone. So I mean, it's definitely been interesting with COVID. We were also very afraid of what would happen if we didn't, thankfully, but what would happen if we completely filled up at our shelter. We're the only DV shelter in our county. So there's not really other organizations that we can, partner up with and say, hey, but thankfully, it's not the best option, seeing as our survivors need that. That confidential place with, cameras and all of this security system. But we were able to partner up with a couple of hotels here in town to say, in the case that we have some sort of overflow, we at least have somewhere for these people to stay, and not expecting them or saying, you got to wait, 3 weeks until someone exits our program in order for you to come in and have that confidential and safe place. So it's definitely added a whole layer of different needs and uncertainties and a trauma, honestly. And so it's definitely been a different ballgame, throwing COVID into it. But we're trying to manage day by day and trying to, meet these individuals where they're at and really, really, really set all of our procedures, to make sure that not only our staff, but everyone we're also bringing in is physically, and, their health is just, good as it can be during these times.
Number one. Yes, you're right. Thank you so much, Zeta. And Taffy, you want to build on that?
Yeah, so I don't work with an organization currently. We don't provide shelter. And so I have to safety plan. Of course, shelter is a referral that I can always offer, and do often. I think the biggest difference I have seen in with the whole COVID and victims, my safety planning has changed, from a phone call, hey, is this Sally? Do you have a few minutes to talk? To, are you safe to talk to me right now? Right? Like, are you safe? Are you in a place where we can have this conversation, and coming up with ways to ask that question that she can answer without getting her in trouble, right? In case,
Yeah, the same. And then especially if your perpetrator is right there next to you, or sometimes a lot of times they'll pressure you to be on speaker. So they'll tell you pick up that call, but put it on speaker. So it's good to have definitely at least some kind of code lingo in order to get that information, and then be prepared to call the authorities if need be too.
Exactly. Additionally to that, a lot of my safety planning has changed its focus. Not that I always focused on getting a woman out or getting a victim out of the situation, because it's up to her whether it's safe or not to leave. But really helping them understand that Like if you are in an argument or things are getting heated and things are escalating, stay out of the bathroom, stay out of the kitchen, stay out of the garage, right? Try to keep things in the living room and the bedroom because there's lots of soft landing spots and not a lot of hard corners, and weapons. The bedroom, depending on where the weapons are kept, if there's guns as part of the situation. Ways that we can, I've talked a lot to victims about ways to de-escalate, tactics to help them de-escalate, ways that they can agree or try to infuse humor or, whatever it is that they think will help de-escalate with their perpetrator. Basically, how do you survive when you can't leave? That's our focus has really changed to how to survive when you cannot leave, because COVID hasn't just increased people's stress levels. It hasn't just brought people together in their homes for many hours a day, but it's also really impacted finances. And so a victim may have been planning to leave, right? She may have saved up $500 to get somewhere, and suddenly she has to buy shoes for her kid, or she needs milk and cheese, or that those financial resources get used up. And so that safety plan changes, right? How do we survive when we can't leave? That's really what we've kind of had to change our focus to a lot more than we did previously.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. I'd like to kind of go over the list of good items to consider, things that are useful in times of need, disaster, chaos. I'm going to list a few things. I love you ladies to help me out if I miss anything here. But one of the things I would definitely stress is the importance of identification documents. That's a big thing, especially if you are in a relationship where you are being financially abused, or there is some kind of containment of having those papers being even out there. Sometimes abusers will hide those on purpose for the duration of a marriage or a relationship. But there are certain things that you'll definitely need, like your birth certificate, Social Security, because honestly, if you have to go to, let's say, a county office and file for some general relief or something like that, that's going to be one of the first things they ask for is some identification documents. And then there's personal papers to add to that, like your marriage certificate, divorce papers, school records, vaccination records. And then obviously we have the funds where I would suggest keeping like a Visa prepaid card somewhere, for instance, because sometimes cash is just too findable, and maybe you could just slip a card in a book or something like that to hold on to for a later date. That's always very handy to have. Any kind of keys, extra key copies, for instance. If you need to get out of a situation fast and the car keys are concealed or they're hidden, that might need to be something that you need. Also, a safety deposit box filled with some of these items. If you are able to afford that and able to have that, it's always a good idea to have a little box with all these goods that you may need at a later date. And then ways to communicate. Sometimes we talk about getting a phone card or a supplemental cell phone. An address book, important phone numbers, because, a lot of us, we only remember like one phone number, and everything else, just escapes us, especially in time of chaos where you're not going to be thinking clearly. And this is the thing this is why you need a safety plan, really, is because during an emergency event where you have to get out, and we're talking about homicide here. We're talking about preventing actual deaths and murders. So there's a total element here of the fear and the chaos that surrounds you inside the home or outside the home, wherever you are, to where you're in fight or flight or freeze, and you just can't see past the hour, the minute. You're stuck in that second. You're stuck there just wondering what you're going to do. So that's why, again, it's very important to have all these measures in place. Was there anything? I would also like to talk about pepper spray. Now, if there is an opportunity to at least have one can in your car, one can stuffed in in maybe your makeup bag or something like that in a concealed place where maybe your abuser is not going through, maybe even the bathroom. If you tend to lock yourself into a bathroom, that kind of, who knows what your go-tos are, but it's always good to keep something around just in case you'll ever need to pull that out. So yes, ladies, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think for the most part, that's what I usually always say. I always, state that if possible, and only our survivors can make that call, to have a lot of the times the safety plan is you have like a minute to get out, and that's what you're going to have to work with. And so a lot of the times is if we're planning, for a specific time and day that you feel that you and your children or you yourself are able to get out of the situation, and you're not going to be able to luggage out a couple bags or whatever it may be, it would be, setting them, placing them at your mom's house, at a friend's house, where you can say, all I'm going to do is grab the last minute things that I need to grab, and I'm out the door, and I'm going to stop on my friend's on the way out or whatever it may be, grab my bag that I've already packed, that I've had, and a lot of the times you can't walk out with a bag, right? So I always say, throw on an extra shirt under your sweater when you're going out to the grocery store, leave it in the car. Whenever you have time, you drop it off at your friends. You throw on an extra pair of leggings under your jeans or whatever it may be. So that it's not this drastic, you have now only 4 shoes. So it's always little by little. If you take things to your friend's house, drop it off at your mom's house, you leave that extra shirt, you leave that extra pair of leggings or whatever it may be, so that it's not this where did all your clothes go type of thing. So that's always one of the biggest things that I always say. And also just something for the children. I always say, bring something that, they can, that they are attached to, or that brings them that sense of home or security. Because I think a lot of the time we forget that the children are also very much going through this. And so that's always something that I always throw. If you can, something that the children feel safe with, or brings them some sense of security or home feeling. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Taffy. Could you follow that up, please? And again, can you add whatever you think necessary it is, especially for parents to bring,
Sure.
For their children?
Yeah. When I fled my first husband, I fled with my 3 young children, and it was hard. It was, there's some crazy stuff ended up in my minivan. Let me tell you that. A bread machine. What was I thinking? The get out bag. I always talk with my survivors about having a get out bag at somebody else's house. I think one thing that a lot of survivors don't realize, that I've run up against quite a lot of times actually, that we've had to problem solve through, is getting those documents that Zahida was talking about. It can tip off a perpetrator if he sees that the bank statement is missing, or if he takes care of the birth certificates. Mm-hmm. And so understanding how to help a victim or a survivor order those things through the government and send them to a friend's house, send them to mom's house, send them to your workplace, send them, somewhere other than the home. And it takes time to get those things. Photocopy, you can print things off the computer, photocopy things, put them right back. That's one of the things that we've had to talk about, ways to get those documents without getting caught. The money card, that's a really, really good one. Definitely the money card. Extra cell phone track phones are, even a flip track phone. And one thing that most people don't think of is feminine hygiene products. If you flee in the middle of your cycle, you don't think to grab your package of tampons, right? And you may need your money for gas and for milk. And so making sure that there's feminine hygiene products, diapers, diaper wipes for those kids. Leaving with kids is a whole nother monster. It brings up a whole lot of other stuff. So I really like the idea of making sure that there's a blanket or a pillow or, a stuffed animal, something that that child really loves. Something that really meant a lot to my kids was I had a picture of their dad. They had daddy dolls, and I didn't forbid them to bring that. Making sure that you're still reinforcing the fact that this person is their parent, right? Like, dad may not be nice to us right now, but he's still your dad, you know, or your mom or your grandma or whoever it is who's perpetrating violence against you. And so just being really aware of your language. That's some of the safety planning I do with moms and parents, is being really aware of your language while you're going through this, while you're getting out of the house, while you're driving out of town, while you're getting into the shelter. The kids are hearing all of that. So how are you going to verbalize that with the kids in the car with you?
Yes, and as hard as it is, sometimes the best thing you can do for your kids is to maintain some level of composure. As soon as you start triggering your children into becoming as fearful as you are, sometimes they could even have health complications become manifested with their stress levels. So that's a big deal as well. And definitely medications is something, especially if your child has, diabetes or something where they're going to need their meds at some point, especially if there is a high level of stress, you're going to need that to be on standby. And then I kind of would like to talk about so for me with my advocate, I basically, when I got to make a police report, I had an advocate meet me at the police station, and I would advise anybody to do this. Luckily, I had friends that could really think clearly in that moment and help me along, even plan that out. But it's not something that I was even aware of at the point where I needed to make the police report. So would one of you like to address that real fast?
Yeah, so at our organization, we do accompany our survivors or our clients that are already at the shelter if they need to go and make any type of police report. Of course, right now with COVID, things have changed, so they limit the amount of people that come in. So that's been tricky. But pre-COVID, it was, do you need advocacy to, an advocate to attend court with you, would accompany you to do that, to go and make a police report. A lot of the times, I think that these individuals have been isolated from family and friends, and a lot of our clients, what we see at our organization is, they have these really they don't have the relationships that they had with their friends, right? Because they never followed through with hanging out, or every time they called they were never available, or whatever it may be. So I've seen a lot that I don't really have friends anymore, none that I can trust or rely on. Families sort of they've been checked out. They tried helping at first, but because I wasn't ready, or I didn't see it at the time, they sort of gave up on me. And so just knowing that you have that one person on your side who believes in you, that's what I've heard from our clients, it's just the best support and feeling that a survivor, especially when they're going to testify, it's just having that support is really important, because a lot of the time, as much as we would love to say our law enforcement are all believe our survivors, or believe every single detail of what their story is, their journey is, a lot of the times that's not the case. And so knowing that you have someone that's on your side, to say, I believe you, I hear you, I see you, and I'm here with you, it's just the biggest and most needed support at the time. So our advocates do that. We do attend court hearings and all of that stuff with our clients.
Right. And I'd like to also point out that although, law enforcement is, they're there to do specific jobs, they're not necessarily just trained and so much in domestic violence. The thing is, they deal with a broad overview of crimes, and each level of training only covers so much. And that's why it is very valuable to have an advocate there with you. And I'd also like to talk about the process. This is going to vary from state to state, but one of the best tools and kind of weapons of defense, I guess, would be a restraining order. This is something where most likely, even if your perpetrator has not shown aggression to your children, usually the courts will always recommend putting your children on it until things can be dealt with in a matter of where they could be evaluated to a certain point, where with maybe a monitor to kind of vet them to make sure they're not going to have any violent tendencies. Because look, once you are assaulted, being the parent, there's really no telling what that abuser may do. And that's the bottom line, is that we really need to keep our children protected as best as possible, even though sometimes we can't think past, they would never hurt our kids. They would never hurt him or her. But a lot of times that's not the case. I mean, there's a lot of, I'm sorry to have to bring this up, but there's a lot of murder suicides that happen as a point in which, they're trying to silence anybody from causing that shame and devastation to either their professional or social perspectives. So, Taffy, did you want to join in on that about the restraining order, especially if you had any advice?
Yeah, I was a court-appointed advocate for a few years. It was amazing work. And in my location, unfortunately, children are not automatically put on any kind of restraining or no contact order. In my location, you really have to advocate for that to happen, especially if the violence was not directed toward the children. If it was just directed toward the mother, then the court wants to maintain the established relationship of the parent and child. And so that's just something that happens in our court. We have to, then safety plan around, all right, visitation and how we're going to try to keep our kids safe and do those sorts of things. An advocate is really, really helpful, I believe, because a lot of times the paperwork is really hard to fill out. It can be quite confusing. Numbers and letters and repeat questions and who's the plaintiff, even, legal language is confusing. It's not English. And you're, when you have somebody who's in the midst of crisis, and they're in the midst of brain fog, and they're like, I don't know who the plaintiff is. I don't know if I want a restraining order or no contact order, an anti-harassment order. I don't know what date this happened on. I can't even tell you how to spell the word "the" at this point. Really helps to have an advocate there to be all just kind of reflect back to them their thoughts. You told me that when the situation happened, you had a bloody nose. Is that something that you would like to put into the paperwork? Do you feel that that's important for the judge to know? Trigger their memories, help them talk through it, put the numbers and the letters in the right place, get the form to the right person, all of that sort of thing. Sometimes there's triplicate and duplicate stuff that has to go to the lawyer. And for a while there, one of the courts I worked at made the victim get all of that paperwork to the perpetrator and to the court and to themselves. And, as an advocate, that was something that we had to work hard to get that to end. That the court can send that letter. She doesn't have to. So yeah, no contact order. Something else that sometimes survivors don't understand is that a restraining order is appropriate most often during somewhat amicable divorces, relationship separations. The no contact order is usually more of a criminal based. If there has been an arrest in the relationship, even that sort of thing, it's hard for victims and survivors to understand some of those languages and lingos and what they mean. So
yes. Thank you so much for bringing on that. And Zaida, would you like to follow this up? We're going to wrap up in just a couple minutes. So anything that you'd like to share to close, be valuable.
I think just in general, overall, I think the biggest thing that I would say that we should do is just educate ourselves on what domestic violence looks like, what everything that comes with it. I think a lot of the times people don't really understand the gravity of what a survivor goes through, and also what the survivor continues to go through. I think a lot of the times people think, once they're out of the situation, their life goes on, right? Like they're out, they're good, you're good, right? And it's really not. And I think that we see that with our clients that are at the shelter, because we see that, the struggle, the obstacles, everything still continues. It doesn't just end there. A lot of the times, a lot of our survivors will continue to live their life with certain things that are triggering to them. And so this is always going to be their reality. They, will need to cope with life and different situations differently because of the domestic violence. So I think that one of the things is really understanding and really grasping the amount of of the impact that domestic violence has on these individuals and families, I think, is the biggest thing.
Thank you. Yes, that's so glad that you ladies are here and you could share your valuable expertise. And I'm so happy that honestly, I had this opportunity to bring you guys in and to connect with Ashley's audience, she has an audience of amazing women who we cover some really crazy deep topics, and this is a valuable one right now. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And audience members, thank you so much too. And please forward this to anybody that you may think might be in danger or might need help. And real fast, I'd also like to say that could you, Zaida, first tell them how they can connect with you if they need to, and then you, Taffy, as well?
Mm-hmm. So you can always reach out to our crisis line. Our number is 1-805-964-5245. Once again, we're in Santa Barbara, California, and our crisis line crisis and information line is 1-805-964-5245. 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't currently work at a shelter, but I would just direct everybody to the National DV hotline, which is 1-800-799-7233, if I remember that correctly. And that's 24/7 again. If you're looking for any of my writing or blogging or advocacy, that's at littlebirdflies.wordpress.com, and you can reach me through there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My name's Girstin again, and you can connect. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And I try to be a moderator and mediator for many teens that have problems talking about intimate partner violence to either officials or parents or whomever. So I like to provide my service in that realm too. And thank you everybody who joined, and thank you ladies for joining me as well. And I hope everybody has a fantastic week. Go TUF Women Table. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. And broadcast.